What's good? What's good? Ladies and gentlemen, how y'all doing? Welcome to the first Robka stream. You know, we don't even have an official name for this, but it's 2024 now. I was about to say 2023 already. And everybody and their mama gotta have a podcast. So why not one more? I understand that there's going to be a little bit of annoyingness with the audio here, but you're meant to listen to this anyway, so we'll work on that later, especially for the cut videos, because you know I'm gonna do that. But how y'all doing? Want to introduce yourself? Who's this man next to me?
I go by the name of Simple Sages, or actually Gabe Garriga. I'm actually Rob's brother-in-law, but still brother from another mother. So I'm happy to be here doing this.
Yep, all his links are also in the description, and by his only link is the Twitch channel that he does say he is going to make videos on.
Yes, I do want to start that soon.
So he will be doing that. Also, I got my stuff down there. Y'all know, if some of y'all know me, at least, you know, Microwaves also got that, and Robka right here. I got a few videos on the channel. But what is the point of this? It is literally called Foundations just because it's the first episode and because it's the first time that we're doing this. So it's gonna be a little scuff, it's gonna be a little random, it's gonna be a little broken, but we're out here, you know? And the purpose of me and both of us wanting to do this is basically just, I want to get my thoughts out there, right? There is a lot of things going on in the world, and in times of, you know, I suppose anxiety and troubles, people always will revert back to their most basic beliefs. What is the foundation of everything, basically, right? What is it that you believe, and why is it that you believe? What is it that you are, and why is it that you are? In turn, you know, in existence. So we want to talk about that. We want to talk about, we want to hope, pray that all of our background music is going loud. But we want to talk and hope that, you know, the Lord uses us in whatever way He's able, hopefully to just speak to people, even if it's just a few, even if it's just friends and family and stuff like that, that He may speak through us, and, you know, to Him be the glory. So obviously, just as the super base foundation, most of the things, well, everything that we're going to say, even speculations and stuff like that, they're going to be based on biblical truth, right? The scriptures, the Bible, and stuff like that. Like anything we talk about, whether it's serious or whether it's, you know, silly, goofy stuff, a lot of, you know, our base beliefs of how everything functions and works is based in the Bible. So those are basically just, I suppose, to get that structurally sound. I want people to be able to come back to this video, because I do hope to make a ton of these videos, right? Let's hope that we can keep on doing this. And people could come back to this video and just know the basic foundations of what it is that we believe. Also, anybody in chat, also appreciate y'all, Dark Justice and Phoenix, for being here right off the bat. Moderators as well. But name it Frozen Dinner Podcast. Hey, but then we're gonna have to eat the iced dinner, because it will have to be frozen. But yeah, so basically, just so people could come back to this and know the foundation of what we believe. Anybody in chat is always able to ask questions randomly whenever we're live as well. We'll try to get to them. And yeah, but today I just want to establish that, why we're doing this and stuff like that. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think part of that too is hoping that it becomes recognized that no matter who you are, what you feel you believe or don't believe, that technically everybody has a foundation, right? Everyone is living their life based off of what they may not even be aware, like ideas of how the world works. And so we want to be open about the ideas that shape the way we look at the world, because what happens a lot of times is, you know, being aware that we have ideas helps you understand what you're doing, but a lot of times some people may even think they don't have like a view, a worldview, or a way of thinking, but that is a way of thinking that you don't have a way of thinking. So hopefully that, like, no matter where anyone is at, by listening to this, you can not only get where we're coming from, but maybe even pick up like, oh, maybe the way I think about things is a little different than I thought. Like once I start actually thinking of where do my ideas and thoughts come from. So yeah, I'm kind of excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, literally that's why it's named Foundations. This episode, at least, I don't know if maybe we'll just name the whole thing Foundations. I don't know, but it's going down to the most basic of ideas, which is kind of also what I want to talk about, and one of the main points that I want to talk about, which is every time we have any belief, anything that we believe internally and then act it out in our actions and how we live, there is always going to be a further and further based question. You know what I mean? Like, in the sense that if you believe something is morally right, okay, why is it morally right? And then you go back and you keep on following that train down deeper and deeper, which I kind of, through my thinking and stuff like that, I've kind of realized it all winds up always back before the beginning of time, before the beginning of existence. What was the truth about that? And if we establish a truth about what was before everything, that is what's going to very much determine what we believe today. I made like 2 videos on this channel before, and the main ideas of those videos basically were similar in the sense that what is true about the beginning is going to be true about the middle and the end. And if you start in a meaningless, hopeless beginning, then so too is the middle hopeless, so too is the end hopeless and meaningless as well. And I guess another one of the big reasons as to why we want to do this, and one of the big ideas that I had in my head as to why I want to make this podcast here, is because when you look around, especially if you live on the internet basically, which I'm on the internet a lot, is you could see everything is like, it's just depressing. You know, it's just the news, social media, everybody has this kind of down and out mood that they're just kind of, I give up, or things are tough already and everything sucks, everything's meaningless, everything's whatever. And people grab onto whatever they can, in a sense, right? That's why political tensions get so high. That's why people join cults. That's why people do random crazy things, because they're looking for why am I here? What is the purpose? You know, if you live a meaningless life or you don't understand that meaning, then you're going to grab anything you can, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Is again going back to everybody believes something, and you know, knowing that, I think through the years of growing in my personal relationship with God, which we'll probably get to talking about at some episode for both of us, but is just that, you know, there's an idea that there's an author named C.S. Lewis. I'm probably gonna quote him a lot too, and he mentions
any
that
Christians out there, y'all know.
Yeah. C.S. Lewis is a good guy. He wrote Chronicles of Narnia and amongst other really good books. But he actually says that like the whole history of human suffering is humans trying to find happiness in things that are not God, and that stems everything. Because if you're trying to find fulfillment in things or in other people or in your work or your job or your entertainment or your passions and stuff like that, and God's out of the picture, like it's gonna lead to that downward spiral of what were we as human beings created for. And I think that's truth. I think that's not just my belief. I think that's actually truth. And when you look at the world out there, especially the internet, where everybody, you know, is posting things online, you're like, wait, you know, apart from God, everything is just sort of, well, what do I feel is this? And then what do I feel is that? What do you feel is that? Like, I think you're wrong. I think I'm wrong. So, you know, a lot of that is, I think all of that chaos, in a sense, stems from that foundational view of not knowing who God is. And that's, we see that every day, especially on the internet.
Yeah, exactly. And I really like how you said and I think that is truth, because there's opinions and then there's truth. Right. And the question is, something has to be true. Not everything could be true, right? I mean, especially when two truths, quote unquote, oppose each other. When one says this is true and it very blatantly says the other thing is a lie, is it truly true? So there has to be an objective truth of all things, a base that we could have in order to think logically, in order for logic to even exist. And obviously both of us do think that is God, and specifically the God of the Bible. Because without even, or first off, to even establish a God at all, if there's no God, then there is no morality, there's no order, there's no logic in the sense, because it boils down to opinion versus opinion. And here we are making another podcast, but hopefully
Right.
we are trying to be stable in that truth of the Bible. And because if not, it's again just more and more opinions, which you will hear our opinions
Yes,
on
of
certain
course.
things and fun stuff. And like he was saying, when we get distracted, or when we're obsessed, I suppose, with like things, whatever it may be, distractions of entertainment or money or power, whatever it may be, it's not necessarily that those things are bad, but it's what is the ultimate purpose of being alive, you know? Clearly, anybody who's watches my Microwaves channel, my other stuff, my other videos on my Microwaves Twitch and YouTube, y'all know I like anime, y'all know I like video games, y'all know I like all that stuff. There's nothing wrong or bad about that stuff. It's art, you know? Like, there's beautiful storytelling, there's awesome ways to bring out, you know, truths of whatever it may be in a cool artistic way in art and anime in video games. But it's now, what is that pointing towards? And is it pointing towards that ultimate truth that we're trying to establish?
Yeah, I think they bring up that good point of I like anime too, so I'm watching. I haven't probably seen as much as what people would want me to see, but
I'm a boomer. I'm an anime boomer.
I'm old, yeah. So, but I like the classics, you know. But the idea, like for example, my wife and I are watching animes. We almost any show we watch, we really talk about it, and we're like, well, what themes do you see, right? And where do you see the story going? And a lot of it we can always tie it down to what we say is ultimate truth. We say the story that God has written is the story. It's the greatest story ever told. And I think everything points back to that. And it's one of those things where I think realizing that, okay, if there's written into reality, into our creation, the story that God put forward, yeah, it makes sense that anytime anyone tells a story, it's going to point back to what reality is, right? There's only going to be so many stories a human being can conceive of if you break that down enough. And it's fun. It's interesting to be able to point that out and see that, like, especially when we're watching anime, like for an example, right? Like, you know, my wife got me to watch The Last Airbender when we got married. We were literally on our honeymoon, and she's like, "We're gonna watch The Last Airbender." Yeah, and I was like, all right, I'll watch it. And you know, the first few episodes, like, oh, it's a kiddie show. But then I got hooked. I got hooked as soon as Zuko showed up with the blue mask and everything, and I was like, all right, I'm hooked. And anyways,
now there's something real.
You're right, yeah. And the point is that, like, yep, the point is that, like, I was able to then watch The Last Airbender, right, and see themes and structures and stuff. And I think, like, for example, Zuko's structure of his character of going from, you know, looking for honor and seeking honor in different things, and then his character growth of having a complete transformation and being a completely different person, to me speaks of so many themes of what I see in the gospel, right? When I read the Bible, right? Having a new birth, you know, and being a completely different person. And even after that moment where Zuko kind of wakes up that new person and he has that, you know, dragon dream or whatever. It's been a while since I watched it. But he still made a bad decision, right? He still made a bad decision to sort of help his sister capture the Avatar.
It's like that old self.
Yeah, it's the old self, right? And that was such a real thing because you could tell he still made that decision, but being the new Zuko, also, it didn't sit comfortably with him.
Yep.
And then, you know, so all those types of things you see, like, yeah, that's just like real life. That's just like coming to God and being born again, and you still make mistakes, you still make patterns, but the new person is something totally different.
Yes.
And yeah, and I love being able to see that, like, in shows and stuff like that. And it makes like The Last Airbender, for example, a better show because it's getting very close to reality in that aspect. But yeah,
and a lot of those themes always tie back to identity, right? Because that's one of the big things that we always speak of in Christianity and the gospel when we talk about it at all, is identity, is who you are versus what you do, you know? And a lot of the focus is, yes, your actions matter, but that is not what defines you as who you are in a sense. You know, the ultimate truth, the ultimate reality of the situation when we speak of, you know, scriptural truth is when you become a Christian, when you take on that new identity, you are a new creation, a new being, a new identity, you know? And that is awesome to see in a lot of media when it's Avatar: The Last Airbender, and anybody who watched my stream in God of War as well.
Right.
Because, I mean, there's so many games, and also, I do want to talk about God of War, because it's pretty, it's an awesome game, and then there's other stuff about the gods and stuff that's we could talk about about the Old Testament. But the point being, right away here, is that it is very cool to see the idea of Kratos going from such a violent individual and then completely his character just changing from who he was to who he is, still wrestling with all the things he did, but understanding that's not him anymore. You know, understanding the new identity that he's taking on, right? And that's just awesome to see. Also, real quick, what are your thoughts on since we were talking about Avatar already, Netflix Avatar?
I'm.
What's good, Jake?
Yeah, I am cautiously optimistic about the show. Like, I feel like when they first announced the live action, I was like, and then they said, well, the original creators on there, and I was like, okay. And then it was like the original creators left, and I was like,
Exactly. But, I don't know.
But I gotta be honest, I kind of mentioned that, like, as soon as the trailer started dropping, I feel more confidence. Like, okay, this actually might be pretty good. This actually, I've never seen the movie that doesn't exist. I not even attempted. So I've only seen, like, you know, bits of, you know, but anyways, like, the trailers themselves look to me hopeful, right? And I think that's a good thing. And you know, more information's coming out, and I just read something.
Thank you to whoever just subscribed. I cannot see.
Yeah, you can move that. Yeah.
Oh, it's too late.
Well.
Thanks for the sub.
Yeah, thanks for the sub.
I couldn't say yeah.
But that was my bad. Actually, it's probably down here. There we go.
Okay.
I lost my train of thought. But no, like the more that it's getting closer to the release date, they're releasing more information. And I'm like this because I just heard that they're not doing the timeline with the comet. Like, they had in the show they had like a 1 year timeline.
Yeah.
So apparently the creators said they're not gonna do the 1 year timeline, and the reason was we don't know how old the kid actors are gonna be by the time we finish the show, which I get makes sense in reality if, like, production making the show. But they didn't really say what they were gonna do. You know what I mean? So it may just be a comet's coming and we don't know, and they write it that way. But that's one of those things.
That's
like,
a major point.
Yeah, that's the thing. Sozin's comet's like a big deal.
Yeah.
So they didn't really. All they specifically said they're not gonna do the 1 year timeline. So that's can still be worked around. But I am gonna watch it. I am gonna attempt it.
Yes. We're still gonna watch it. We're still gonna see, and maybe we'll roast it or praise it, but I don't know about that. But also, yes, it's Jake. Thank you for the sub. Appreciate you. And my bad, Effie. I forgot that you haven't played the game, but it wasn't major spoilers or anything. You know, I'm just saying the general ideas of it. You know, looks good, but stuff about story changes is worrying. Yes, I know. That's what I'm saying. And what did they say about? I don't know if I saw a critical video that said they're trying to appease, or not appease. What's the word? They're trying to aim for Game of Thrones fans, which I'm like, what does that even mean? Are they just saying like more like adult or more like mature?
I'm hoping they just mean in the sense of like quality of budget. You know what I mean? That's what I'm hoping for. Like, in the sense of like it looks visually cool.
Yeah.
That's my hope. But I did see that and I was like, oh.
Like, what does that mean? I mean, I don't know. They want to make it more adult somehow. That's what I was thinking. Like if it's more mature themes or like more serious, that could be cool, because they could definitely explore that. Because like you actually mentioned right at the beginning, right when I went back and watched it, I don't know how long ago this was at this point, but at season 1 and especially the first few episodes, definitely it's like, okay, this is just a kid show. Like, why is this? Why is everybody saying this is so good?
Right.
And then it, you know, takes off and gets really good. So I'd be fine if they cut out a little bit, but Aang is also a kid, so
Right.
like there still has to be that. One of the big themes was the accepting of responsibility and him not wanting to, him not being able to be a kid like normal and all that. So I don't know what they're gonna do. It's based off of a kid's cartoon,
Right.
exactly. Like literally, Game of Thrones is it's a completely different genre and completely different. Like, I mean, you know, I have not watched it. It's a little too much for me, but. If they mean in the sense that they just want to do more serious topics,
Right.
that could be good. But the original creators left, and
Yeah.
and it was specifically, I think, for creative differences. Right?
Yeah, they said that. From what I understand, they supposedly left on good terms though. Like it was like, hey, creative differences, but you guys are doing all right.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we'll see, you know. And but the Game of Thrones thing, I'm hoping they mean in the sense of like quality
Yes,
of the show, of being like how it's shot and acted, and maybe the impact. Like everybody was watching Game of Thrones,
Yes.
maybe everyone's gonna watch Last Airbender. Hopefully that's what they're thinking, you know.
Let's
But
hope. But I think it's maybe the fantasy aspect of all it. Yeah, like if they want to make it cool and visual and all that stuff. It takes off when they go to the Earth Temple. Also, they said they want to make more serious than kids, which beats the point of the character. Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Like,
Air Temple.
it would be fine if they go with more serious topics, but like I said, Aang is still a kid, and that's one of the major themes in it is him wanting to be a kid and then not wanting that responsibility of the whole world, basically.
Something I've always said, and if my wife's watching this, I don't know if she is, but like we always say it's like, normally whatever the original medium something came out on is going to be the best. Like Avatar The Last Airbender was a cartoon, and that's always going to be the best. It was made for kids. The characters are kids, and it's that struggle as you grow up. So I don't ever think the show is going to be as good as the cartoon originally, but yeah, I think that's it's a point where it's like they're kids in the show. So if you're going for Game of Thrones and you want it to be for adults, something's gonna be a disconnect, because now like, oh, you want kids to act like adults, or is this gonna be like what's going on? But I also understand that.
Are they gonna make it shockingly dark for no reason?
Hey, right, yeah,
Like
that's what I'm afraid of, because I think, you know, a lot of times people are like, well, yeah, the original fans of Avatar have grown up, so they're adults now. So sometimes the conclusions automatically make it dark. It's like, well, I don't.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean I always like things that are dark just because I'm older watching it, you know. So it's just sort of like,
I'm older.
right.
I know I'm depressed, and like literally that's what it is.
Right.
My goodness. But if they go for the maturation or mature themes for Aang, like he's about to adapt to the new world 100 years later, then sure. I pay respect to the OG.
Yeah.
There's a reason why it was so good in the first place. I can turn to this character though. The
Right,
development, the
yes,
character development for season 3. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, because it was literally starts as a super kid show, and I think now you could look back and say that was on purpose. But
Gabe out here saying the manga is always better. Is he wrong though?
yeah, literally.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! Did you ever read the Avatar cartoons or the comics?
They made comics like
The
afterwards.
in-betweens,
Yeah,
yeah.
there was like I have a couple of volumes that are like they did a couple storylines that were different comics that they put into a book. I don't have them all, but I have some of them, and it was really cool because they drew it like the cartoon, and one of them picked up directly after the series ended.
Yeah, I know. And I know that there was like stuff looking for Zuko's.
Oh yeah, it was fun. It's interesting because the worst. I have 4 or 5 of them, and the worst one is the one where they look for Zuko's mom. I just feel like they dropped the ball on it, but it was just sort of, anyway. That's a whole thing if no one's ever read that, but yeah, something. I guess those are also things they could pull from to add to the show.
Yeah.
Right, because there's been other things after the cartoon that the creators have made in the comics that they have more things to add to the show. Maybe I don't know. That could be something. But
They made like a whole what avatars? The Avatar creators made something else. What was it called? I always forget. They always say it's the successor of Avatar.
No, yeah, they did a couple things, but I do know one thing they did was Voltron. They did Voltron. I think 1 or 2 of the original creators did the reboot of Voltron on Netflix, and that was actually pretty decent. We watched that too, and you see a lot of the characters borrowing from Korra and Last Airbender in Voltron, and you see the similarities. But yeah, that was its whole other own thing, which was good and bad for that. But
tell tell that to Rob about Necopara. I prefer the light novel. Or oh my goodness, this was Taylor. Oh, that's his fiance. But yeah, I mean, I overall am excited, but I'm cautiously optimistic in the sense because obviously the bar. And in my other video, I said that the bar is so ridiculously low that it's got to be better. Just the little bit of bending immediately looks way better. But yeah, I mean, I guess that is a good point. But I guess to return to the topic that we were talking about originally, which was the base storylines or the main stories that we see in media and in Avatar connecting to scripture and stuff like that. Oh, hello, sister.
Hey.
You're doxing yourself. I had it on you guys.
In the living room TV. Just go to my YouTube app and then try to find it on there. It should be just whatever's live.
Oh my goodness! Wait! I forgot. No, speaking of Jake, I forgot. Taylor, if you're watching, if his fiance's watching, what is wrong with you? She likes the Avatar movie.
I haven't seen it. I gotta have some intellectual honesty here. I have not seen it. I have just been warned by everyone that they will kill me if I see it. So it's one of those things where it's just sort of like, all right, I will just play along. But I honestly have not seen it, so I have technically no opinion of it. So
I will never forgive her. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's crazy. But yeah, I mean, I guess returning to the story of Zuko in general, and because one of the main things that I did want to talk about today.
Watch that trash, Gabe.
No, do not. Morbius is a better movie. Oh
Morbin time. Yeah, was that what it was?
I never watched that one.
I never watched that either. No.
But I do not want to. And oh my goodness. But yeah. So, do you have anything to add, or anything you want to add on the idea of, like, what is? Because you said scripture would be the greatest story of all time, the greatest story ever written, right? Because I know that you know a lot more about like specific writings, like story structure and stuff like that is what I mean, and how the Bible's actually written and stuff. Because it's always fun to talk about media and stuff like that. It's always fun, and it also connects to a larger point, right?
Yeah. I think,
Thanks for the alert, Jake.
Hey, so I think there's a lot of, so not just the Bible, right? I think of, I just for some background, I had an undergrad degree in Bible and a master's degree in classical literature.
Yeah, he's the more educated.
Yeah, in that sense, yeah. I actually, I went to school and got a piece of paper, just sort of like for books I already read before I went to school. It's just sort of like, all right, I'll check the box. But anyway, like, it boils down to this goes back to Socrates and Aristotle and whatnot, but the idea that there's only really like 4 stories that you could tell, and this is very broad, and it's so simple that you're sort of like, well, duh, and that's the thing about those great thinkers back then, is that they tried to boil down what is reality, right? And not just stories, but just reality in general. And one of the things they came down to was saying that there's really only 4 types of stories or trajectories. And really, out of those 4, there's really only 2, because the other 2 are just combinations of 2.
When you boil it down, everything.
Yeah, and the two main genres were tragedy and comedy. And comedy, not like ha-ha comedy, but in the classic sense, like the word comedy comes from the Greek word that stands for wedding, right? So basically, so really it comes down to there's 2 stories, and comedy just means it just as simple as it gets. You begin low and you end high. So think of a happy ending, right? And the ending is the wedding, right?
Yep.
So, a story begins, there's problems, there's something to be solved, and as the story goes, it's a happy ending. That's literally as simple as you can get it, is begins low and ends high. And a tragedy would then be something that starts high and ends low. So, you just think of, I don't know if you guys remember reading stuff like in high school or whatever, middle school, like Oedipus Rex is like the Oedipus the king is sort of like the really big one. Or it's like a guy, it's like a Greek mythology where the king, this guy was, you know, a oracle said, oh, you're gonna kill your dad and marry your mom or something.
Oh.
And he tries everything in his power to avoid it, and then it ends up happening.
Right.
But it's written as a tragedy. Like he was up here and it ended low, and so that's like a classic example of that story. But like,
there's a ton of themes we could talk about, but at the end of the day, it's like when you boil it.
When you boil, yeah, and that's what they came from. Those classics, it boiled down to those that are two. Like you begin low and end high, or you begin high and end low. And the interesting thing is, like, we are so used to comedy because I think because of the way the gospel, like God has such redeemed humanity as a whole, that like we don't even realize how much comedy shapes us. Because in a sense, even the Bible is comedic, right?
Wouldn't it be both? I mean, like,
yes,
it's both. It's the final story, I suppose. So it would be tragic.
Yes.
And then the final redemption, which I guess would be comedy.
Yes,
all
yeah,
along,
and that's kind of thing. That's like, so the idea is that if that's written to if that's the basic that you can get a story down to, then does that shape reality? And that's the idea, is that, like, you know, in the beginning of Genesis in the Bible, you have the tragedy of the fall, very quick, very sudden, and then from that point on, God makes promises, and the rest of it's very comedic, right? We can see the trajectory of what God is doing with human beings until the end, the final wedding, right? In the Bible, in the end of Revelation, even. So, and that's one of those things where, you know, I can look at stories. So my wife and I, like, I talk about this all day with like Danae, and so she knows exactly what I'm talking about. Where we can look at stories and immediately just know, oh, that's a comedy or that's a tragedy, because did it start with them having a problem and they're gonna work it out? Like every story has a happy ending, and really prior to you know, ancient times, like tragedy was such an ingrained part in people's stories and their life because everything was so terrible back then, you know, in the sense of like, you know, where was real hope? You know, where was real hope? And today we're so shaped to accept comedy that we just think that's how all stories end. All stories end happy ending. Yeah, of course it ends happy ending.
I don't know, because like, I guess that's true, but also the trajectory I see, or that I feel like I see, is just, I feel like for a lot of people, that's actually the hardest aspect of the Bible to accept, that there is a happy ending. Because we look around and we see, you know, death and destruction and all these tragedies, all these things that we see, it's hard for a lot of people to accept, okay, there is a happy ending, and that is reality, that is real. It's not just a fairy tale, right? It's not just a fairy tale. And I don't know, because back in the day, like you just said, things were much worse back in the day, and just in a general sense of like standard of living, just in a general sense of constant wars and how overall, I guess, the world operated, right? And
there wasn't Twitch and YouTube back then, right?
Exactly. This is a true summary. Exactly. And it's like there's all this pain all around you, and I suppose I feel like today we suffer from a different problem, which is like complacency, or it's just everyone has comforts for the most part. Obviously, there's still a lot of parts of the world that don't, but especially here in the US, practically everyone has access to the internet, everyone has food, everyone has basic things, and a majority of society. So it's since I don't have problems, what's the true problem? And it leads to kind of meaninglessness, you know, when you have no challenges or real challenges before you. I also, real quick, where do you think that, when did comedy change? Like the definition? How come? Because now it's just funny. Now it just means funny.
Yeah, I actually have to look into that more, because definitely even in ancient Greek plays and writings, the comedy plays did have humor in it. I just think that, I actually don't know when it actually switched officially, but
a long history.
Yeah, it's very interesting that like the word comedy means something totally different. Like in modern, like you just talk to someone, say, hey, you like comedy? They're not thinking, oh, stories with just a happy ending in general, right? They just mean something funny.
Right.
That is very, and that actually confused me when I first started learning about that. Like, oh, the main genre of all literature is comedy and trash. Like, comedy? I was just like, okay, like whatever. But then I realized, it meant something different.
I assume it's something like laughter, joy, happiness, something like that. But this is why when they make biblical movies, they mess it up, and I'm like, the script is literally there, but I like dark, tragic endings.
You know, it's funny. So
there's a like.
So here's my opinion, right? Here's this is just going into we're so used to having comedy that it's very rare I've actually seen a tragic story. And here's two movies and a book I'll tell you about. So the book would be which by the way, Dune Part 2 is about to come out. Go
Dune
cinematic.
fan.
I'm a big Dune fan. I'm a big Denis Villeneuve fan, the director of it. The Part 2 is
Dune
the second
enjoyer.
part. Yes, it's the second part of the first book. But he's already signed to make a third movie, which would be the second book. And that second book is a tragedy.
Oh.
It's one of the few books I've read where I'm like, okay, this is clearly a tragedy. The author who wrote the original Dune books clearly has a classical understanding that I would love to get into that, of like why I like Dune the books so much.
Well, we're gonna have a
So,
whole
yeah,
episode
yeah.
probably just talking about Dune.
Yeah. For that reason.
Yeah.
So that was one of the few books I've read, and it's funny because the two movies that I actually believe are tragic happen to be Batman movies, and one of them is The Dark Knight with Heath Ledger as
Classic.
Batman.
Absolute
I
classic.
actually think Batman lost that. Like in the end, it's like, oh, the hero you deserve or whatever it was. Like Batman lost. Like
Okay.
he gave up his morals. He did something he was against. Like I think he lost that movie.
How did it end?
Yeah, well, the was it Two-Face, got pushed in the hole or whatever, and then he disappeared. Like, he's like, shouldn't I be in trouble? Whatever. I haven't seen it in a while, but like, Batman gave up his morals. Joker won that movie, and it's funnily enough, I think the other tragedy happens to be the Joker movie. I think that guy's descent into, which was actually a very well written, shown movie, because it was tragedy watching it. Like, you're like, this guy's life is spiraling down. But what I loved about the movie, which was beautiful about the character, is for him it was a comedy. For him, he became himself at the end.
Yeah.
He became happy at the end, right? And that's why I really like that type of storytelling, because it changes what you think of what's a good movie, or what's a happy ending, what's a bad ending.
Yeah.
And I when I say that things are only comedy or only tragedy, I do know, and it's said that, like, those are like the base. Think of primary colors, right? You have red. It's red. All right.
It's red.
Red, blue, and yellow.
So I
right?
should have made that
Yeah,
example.
those are the three primary colors, right? It's red, blue, and yellow. So think of it like tragedy and comedy, like primary color. But we get every other color from combining those colors, right? So there's going to be stories that are a blending of all these different things, and so you can see that in a lot of movies. But yeah, I think it happened to be two Batman Joker movies that actually are the first movies I've seen that I'm like, I don't think that's a happy ending. And then the book for Dune Messiah, which is the second book in the series.
Yeah. And I mean, I definitely like a movie like Joker in the sense where you could write a character very well and still understand, like a well-written character, you're gonna understand this is not a good thing in a sense, right? But the character's written so well that you're like, dang, that's crazy. But I definitely do enjoy those types of movies, just because there's both aspects of entertainment and then the message behind it, right? And it's kind of like I've always said, where I guess moving on kind of to another topic would be one of the number one questions that Christians would get would be, how do you are you able, or should you watch certain things, right? So how would you answer that, I suppose?
And again, this is my opinion, right? Like, this isn't gospel truth or anything like that. I think it depends on the person, and what they feel comfortable with is one thing. So if you're like, I don't want to watch Game of Thrones, it's too explicit, I'm not going to be like, I watched it, you should watch it, therefore, and make you do something against what you feel you're comfortable with. But that's one thing.
Not cause your brother to stumble.
Yeah, and I think just being able to I don't know if they can see Padme. It's like, there's a cat
like
right here, so she's like, I got opinions on this.
I know, literally. She's like, hey.
But I think a lot of it, the way I see it, is
Gotta make some food. All right.
So Gato, yes, Gato, yes, we can see her. She left. But I think that about seeing things and should you watch it, like there was I can't remember this now. I just remember this from my from my schooling.
Mhm.
There was a philosopher back in the day, and they were getting on him. You know, this is ancient Greek, and they're like, "Oh, like he's like, I want to try everything at least once, right?" And then he goes, so this philosopher goes to like a house of ill repute, right? You imagine what that is.
Mhm.
So all his homeboys were just basically like, "Hey, we heard you went down to this place, you know, and that's not a good place to be." And he's like, "Yes, I'm a philosopher. I need to observe everything."
I need to
right?
see.
Yeah.
I need to observe.
And,
everything.
and they're saying like, "Oh, are you gonna go again?" And he's like, "Well, no." And he's like, "Well, I thought you went down there and you said you were observing and you enjoyed it and whatever." And he's like, "Well, yeah." He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "If I go once, I'm a philosopher. If I go twice, I'm a pervert." You know, and it was just like, so I think there's an element in that of the sense of like, you know, we shouldn't be afraid of experiences. You know what I mean? In the sense of like, you can learn from everything. I wouldn't put myself in that experience because
Yeah.
there's things I think God says about that. But I mean, like, if you're watching a show, like sometimes you just don't know what the show is gonna bring. If that makes
Exactly,
sense, you know what I
yes.
mean. So you have to acknowledge that element of
Mhm,
it,
mhm.
because a lot of times people, and this is like even with not something even vulgar or explicit, people are like, "Oh, don't watch that show, it's trash."
Mhm.
And then I watch that show and I'm like, I got something totally different from that.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I think you have to know who you are going into it.
Yes.
To be able to observe it, and don't just let things, this is with anything with anyone, like
Mhm.
I think you should think through what you're reading or watching,
Yep.
and not just be
Yep.
like, "Oh, that's my," you know, like,
Yes.
that's what I believe now.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
my worldview. You know what I mean?
obviously,
You gotta think critically about
Mhm.
that. And yeah, I remember hearing a pastor one time say you should pray before you watch anything and after, and you'll probably won't watch anything after that.
Ever
You know,
watch-
sort
I'm
of
not
ever
gonna-
watch
I can't watch
anything, yeah,
anything
but
ever again.
I don't go that far in that sense. But like I think that's a good, you know, thought though, of just like
Mhm.
think critically about what you're watching and why you would do that. I do say that, but I think one of the things I do am, I think, a little more clear on, I think sometimes, is nudity in movies. Again, that depends on how it's done, I guess, but because like with murdering or whatever, it's like, you know, you watch a war movie, like, aren't you against violence? Like, yeah, but obviously that's fake. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, obviously it's a movie where someone is not really shooting someone. Whereas nudity is
Alec
real.
Baldwin,
Yeah, even
unless-
right. Unless you're Alec Baldwin shooting
Yeah.
a movie. But like, but with nudity at least, that's like, it's not fake. That's really a
Right,
naked person,
right.
and that's something that's, you'll have to think of yourself, because
Mhm.
I don't think there's so much a line in a sense of like, this is the clear line that people should do.
Right.
Because even back then, like the Puritans were like, you shouldn't read Shakespeare. You know, and it's just like,
Mhm.
bro, it's Shakespeare. You know what I mean? Like, it's just sort of like, so that's where what happens when there's that attempt to draw a clear line. It could, who makes the line? You know what
Yes.
I mean? So
And I guess like basing it on as much of the understanding I have of scripture and of my identity in Christ, it's once we start making things laws, then that's when you're more and more tempted to do this or do that. Like when you're like, I'm never gonna watch this, I'm never gonna see this, I know this or blah blah blah, but I'm doing it because I'm trying to be holy and I'm trying to
Right.
be, you know, special or whatever. That's different than when you understand either a struggle or something that you want to know. I don't want to see that just because I know who I am and God puts it in your heart. You know what I'm saying? So it's like when I watch like anime, I love a lot of animes, but anime just has the stereotypical sexual like stuff in like everything.
Yeah.
Like you're literally just watching a normal episode and all of a sudden it's just naked chick comes out. You're like, what? This doesn't even make sense. Why? But there's a difference between, okay, I'm aware this particular show in general at all has a lot of nudity, has a lot of something that I'm not comfortable with, versus I'm watching a show and something happens. Like,
Right.
if you're ideally, right, a mature Christian who understands who you are, it's okay. But what is the ultimate goal, I suppose? Like, I'm watching the show, there's a lot of good themes, there's a lot of good story, there's a lot of good, truths in it. I'm not gonna immediately say, okay, I'm not gonna watch it because there's, this or that. But it's understanding and being aware of
Yeah.
you as a person, you as specifically in your faith, in your relationship with Christ and your stuff, the things that you value more, the things that you want to shield yourself from more. And it's not out of, I have to do this. It's out of, I know what is good, in the sense that God knows what is good.
Yep.
And since he says this is an easy path to take to fall or whatever, then I'm going to listen to that because out of gratitude and out of knowing who God is, who you are, you know. But yeah, because man, I love anime, but it's like walking a minefield as a Christian sometimes, because it be that way. Like it's just and it's not just anime, obviously, like any show, right, at all in any genre and anything, but anime specifically gets very randomly. You just don't expect it. What would be your favorite anime still?
Oh man, that's well, it's funny because I have this conversation with my wife, obviously, and it's funny is that if you go to Japan and ask them, like, if you ask them, like, is Last Airbender animated? In Japan themselves, they'd be like, well, yeah, it's animated. So, like, we have a different definition than the island it comes from. You know what I mean? They're just like, well, yeah, it's animated. Whereas we specifically have this idea of, like, you know, Japan culture and something that comes from there. So I say that because I want to put The Last Airbender up there, but then it's like, is that anime or not anime? It's like, well, if you ask people in Japan, you know, it's sort of like, but man,
everything's animated.
Yeah, I haven't. To be honest, there's, it depends. So I like. So when I started watching anime when I was younger, mainly the things that were out were movies. Like shows weren't really like the big thing back then, at least that from what I experienced. So there's a couple of classic movies I like Akira is a classic. That was like a groundbreak. Yeah, Akira.
There's a big meme. That's literally all I ever hear.
But that animation, I fell in love with the animation when I was young. That's still very great animated. Story doesn't make sense because it's actually like it's a movie out of the middle of a manga. They're like, let's just make a movie out of this one, and it's just kind of out of nowhere.
Yeah. But just probably to see if people would watch it or something.
Yeah, probably. But man, I think story-wise, I really like. And again, I've only been exposed to so much, but I think Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood
still up there.
Yeah, it's still up there.
Still the number one. Still the GOAT.
And Last Airbender. Yeah, I want to say those two. I'm always like, which one's better? But I just feel like, especially with Full Metal Brotherhood, I feel like there was just so many good characters in it. Like every character was good. Like I rarely was like, oh, this is a throwaway character or anything like that. And every character had their own arc and everything. And yeah, I just feel like it was a lot. It was really good. But yeah, I don't know if I'm counting The Last Airbender, that's really up there too. I feel like. I do feel that
sister agrees.
Yeah, I do feel like Last Airbender is probably one of the better stories, period, ever. Like I mean, like written movies, shows, or anything like that. Because there's again, the same thing. There's a lot of good characters, but a lot of good themes, a lot of good things that are wrestled through. And one thing I do like about Airbender is I watched the show the first time thinking like, okay, Aang's the main character. Yeah, Full Metal. Like, okay, Aang's the main character, you know? And then the next time I've watched the show, I'm like, I think Zuko's the main character. So I'm paying attention to Zuko. But then you can watch it again and be like, I'm just going to pay attention to Sokka. You know what I mean? And it's just sort of like no, it's about Sokka. You know what I mean? So everyone has like you can really just see and focus on each character, and they each bring something to light, you know? And,
like you get there for Aang. For Aang. You get there for Aang, and then you stay for Zuko, because like the story of Zuko and Iroh.
Right.
And then like obviously the progression and character progression and story of Aang is also very awesome.
Yeah.
But it's just like once the real story of Zuko starts, that's when I was hooked. That's when I was like, okay, this is some they got some, they cooked.
Yeah, and that was the thing too. Is like I remember watching with the Nate being like, I think he's the main character. Like literally just being like, he had his own episode. Like Zuko alone was like his own episode. Like no one had their own episode. It's just sort of like that's a big deal, you know. And it was just sort of like I just really felt like at the end of the day, Zuko was the main character or the main redemption arc of the whole thing.
Yeah. And I guess, like, continuing on the idea of character redemption, because there's so many shows, movies, games that focus on that. And it is one of the ultimate stories, you know, because it's a hope, right? It's hope. And that was one of the things in the end of God of War as well. which did you like that game? What you think of what you watched?
So I said it. I didn't. Of what I watched,
Uh-huh.
I to be honest, I didn't get too much story because every time I could watch it,
It was the
like
combat.
It was the bad. It looked great.
Yeah, it was
I don't have a
really good,
PS5, so
yeah.
I can't play it myself. But I did see the ending when you finished it. So I can't speak too much on the storyline. But it looked good.
It's a story of redemption as well, yeah. And it's just like, I guess one of the videos I was going to make was about the idea of hope, right? And it's like, what truly is hope? Because anybody can have quote unquote hope, but is that grounded in reality? And hope not grounded in reality would that just be a lie? Isn't that just a lie that we tell ourselves to try to make us feel better, right? And that's why so many people, I think, are hopeless, because they believe this, okay, hope for a better tomorrow, and then that better tomorrow never comes, and then all of a sudden you realize what even is hope? Is that a real thing? So that's why I guess I want to take it back to the Bible, which by the end of this episode I want to talk about the beginning of the Bible as well, because that's where everything we're talking about, anything that we speak on when it comes to biblical truth, has to start in Genesis, which I want to talk about by the end of this episode. But continuing on the episode of the idea of hope, it's Jesus Christ, I would believe, would be the ultimate hope, grounded in the ultimate truth of God, because it has to be something grounded, or else it's nothing, right?
Yeah, I yes, and I think that specifically when we're thinking of hope and faith, even right, like we're talking about hope and faith in a person, in God,
Yes.
right? In a tangible thing, to me tangible, versus just, I think some people, like, if I just wish things hard enough,
Yes.
that's good enough. Like I have
Yes.
faith that things will work out,
Yeah,
but
faith
like,
in
or I
what-
hope
yeah.
that this. But what is that hope or faith in? And that's kind of what it comes down to. Is,
Enough willpower, right?
yeah, enough willpower or enough manifestation powers.
Yes,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
Just like, which
It makes for an epic scene in anime. I'll
Yeah,
tell you
right,
that.
right,
It's super
right.
awesome.
But yeah, the whole thing of it's and sometimes it's not even the amount of faith or hope you have; it's what it's in.
Exactly. Yep.
Because I can have all the faith in the world that I can tie 2 cardboard boxes to my arms, and if I flap hard enough, I could jump off a building and fly. I can have super faith in that. And as soon as I do it, I'm gonna go. I'm dead. You know what I mean?
Cardboard will fly off, and you'll.
Right. But I could be scared of flying and yet still get on the plane and get to my destination, even though I'm super scared and don't have faith in it.
Yeah.
But then again, nowadays there's been all these airplane problems, so it's just sort of
Yeah.
like. But like the idea is like it's not the amount of faith. It's what your faith is in,
Yep.
and. So and yeah, I think that's very important. Is that, like, when we look at the world, it's who we're trusting in,
Yes.
and the hope that it's in, that allows us to go through, and just knowing that nothing in the world that's not God is going to always come through.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah. Everything else will fade away or fail in a sense, And Scripture says, right? It's have faith like a mustard seed, and you tell the mountain to move, and it'll move. Roughly. I don't know if that's the
Right.
exact,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's like you were saying, it's not about the amount of faith, but what you have faith in. And and just like continuing that line of just ideas of hope, because I see a lot of people that either one of two things, really, one of 2 or 3 things, which is really people have never really thought about basic ideas, such as why do I exist, such as why do I keep going. Basic base ideas: where do I come from, why are we here? Or they actively or against certain things, such as the Bible, and a lot of times people don't realize that, or it's active. And when we talk about everybody needs hope, because anybody without hope at all, right? Because I know I keep saying that word, but it's anybody without hope, truly, genuinely, and you just end it. You just jump off a bridge or nothing. You don't, because there's no hope. Why keep going, right? So I always have to. I always feel like I have to, because any Christians probably know of Brother Ken Ham, which he's always very frustrated and always very focused on Genesis because so many people neglect it. Christians don't think it's that important. A lot of times don't think it's important. And obviously, scientists who start with the basis that there is no God or there is no nothing beyond nature are going to also be against it. And there's a lot of Christians who are scared of being academically shamed. They're like, oh, I want to stay in the academic circles. I don't want to be the guy that's anti-science and blah blah blah. Right. But I always like to talk about those things aren't separate in a sense. Science, mathematics, laws, logic can only exist if there was one who established that in the beginning at all. Where did order come from? How did order truly emerge from chaos? And where did that chaos even emerge from? And what is chaos? And how did anything come into existence? So when I talk about that, I love to focus and speak on and speculate a little bit too, because it's fun. Because if it doesn't go against the Bible, I mean, we have a brain right. to speculate and think of. If we know God's character, he's a God of grandeur and specter and beauty, you know. So like the amazingness that would have happened in the 6 days of creation would be insane. So what would one of your ideas be, kind of like the foundations of the beginning of everything? Is that critical, or how critical would you assume it is to the gospel and to our daily lives?
Oh yeah,
I mean, it's a loaded question. Yeah. It's big because
I think it's you have to have the foundation, right? Mm-hmm, and when you're reading the Bible, the beginning is God did this, right? And if you believe God is real, you have to believe that ultimately God is behind those things. Yep. And you mentioned Ken Ham, and you know the very beginning of the Bible is, you know, the days of creation and whatnot, and Ken Ham himself would say, like, you know, you're not saved because of your belief of whether you think it was 6 literal days or not. You know, it's you're saved based on your faith in Christ. You know, so I think within the Christian camp there can be some disagreements in that. I think there's some inconsistencies, to be honest, but the foundation is this is actually God, and God actually created everything we're in, and God's character and nature of who he is what the Bible portrays. Yeah. So whether you're like, oh well, this could have been poetic or literal, that doesn't take away who God says he is and how he is and his character and his nature. So I think that's the ultimate foundation is, do you think that God is who he says he is from his word, right? Yes. And I think that's going to be the ultimate foundation of essentially just, do you believe God? You know, do you believe God? And not just that he exists, but like believe him, you know?
And that the word is true, that is inspired from the divine, from God. And I guess like you said, it doesn't mean you're not a Christian if you don't believe in this. But you are inconsistent, and it doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't really make sense. Yeah. You know, because it's, yes, our faith in Jesus Christ, but what even is that? Why do you have faith in Jesus Christ if there was no need for Jesus Christ in the beginning of all things? You know, because what is the story of humanity? If we start with, so like, just I guess backing up a little bit, if we start with random, like there's no such thing as the supernatural. There's nothing beyond nature, nothing beyond the physical, which is the view of mainstream scientists, right? There's nothing beyond really the physical. Maybe there's dimensions, but everything exists within nature. And if God exists, he is part of nature, not beyond it. And if that is true, which to me already is illogical right off the bat, because it's something cannot come from nothing. You're already breaking basic scientific truths, at least, right? But they seem to make one exception that one time, but it's like, that's the foundation, right? But okay, let's say like things came out of nothingness, or it's a cycle, or there's aliens. Again, you just keep on going back to the source. It's what was the beginning. And if it started randomly and there was no meaning behind it, it was just somehow magically matter and information appeared in a void but what is the void as well? Anyways, right, there's so many questions, right? But then over millions and billions of years, randomly, again, more DNA and information just appeared randomly, and you became a little microbe, and then became a fish or whatever, and then a monkey, and now you're a human. All of it was random. All of it was pointless in a sense, right? Because one of the big things is we give ourselves purpose. We make our purpose. But again, it kind of goes back to what I was saying. Is that just false hope? Is that just a lie we tell ourselves and then to keep on going? And that's why I think that a lot of things are inconsistent with if you believe there's no God, then why do you believe in morality? You know, because if you go up to a normal person that says there's no God, they're going to believe in morality, I'm quite sure. They're going to believe in morality. They're going to believe in doing what's right. They're going to believe in justice, quote unquote, and things like that. But it's why? Why do you believe in these things? And why do you even believe in science and mathematics? How do you know that wasn't random and et cetera, et cetera? So
yeah, I think most human beings live inconsistent, and that goes for myself too. Don't get me wrong. And the reason I say that is because a lot of times, even to be honest, sometimes we're just too busy, especially if you're struggling to live, you know, like and working 5 jobs. You don't have time to sit and wonder, what are my thought processes and what do I think? Exactly. Why do I think what I think? You know, and totally understandable. But what I mean by that, by living inconsistently, is it takes time to draw the logic out of what we actually believe. It's just like, you know, because you get all these cliches of like, yeah, what's good for you is for you, but not for me. It's like, well, yeah, that doesn't make sense even if you think about it, because if it's good for you to kill me, then that's not good for me. You know, it's just sort of like, well, that's good for you. It's just like, and you're like, okay, maybe that doesn't make sense in all senses, in all cases. Like, okay, then it doesn't make sense, you know, and that's what I mean, is that like I think there's a reality that we operate in, and people live in it to the degree that they can live their lives and look for self-interest, right? Which is not always bad. I need to pay the bills to keep a roof over my head. That's considered self-interest. My self-interest is to take care of my family. But you know, a lot of us can go through life not really thinking through the why, and I think that's the why is very important, and I think that's even written into human nature. I think that's why kids ask why all the time. Like, why? Like, because people are coming over, why? It's because, you know, and if you really were to take that kid logically through, it's gonna go back to God created, you know, no matter what. And that's human. Like, all of us, at any point, if we start asking why, and where does this come from, it's going to point back to God, no matter what, and whether you think it will or not. And that's sort of like the you know, that's just the way reality is. And you know, I just is pulling back to shoving Dune to a conversation, is that like so when I read the books, you know, I think my conclusion of what the books are showing is completely different than anything I've seen out there. And a lot of it is there's a point in the book where it says, and it's the height of the book, of the story, it was like, when it comes down to leadership, who gets to play God? And that's what it comes down to. And that's all what it comes. All of our world and power struggles and how do we live and how do we operate is, no matter what, if you can achieve the peak, if you can be the peak human being and it controls everything, like, you know what, I am the rule of the universe. Okay, you're there. But then where do you get your degree? You know, like, where do you get your and that's what it comes down to, is apart from God, everything would just fall apart, right? And we don't really realize that, because sometimes we just don't think it through. And
exactly. Yeah, because there's the practical sense of, you know, you go to work, you got to keep your family fed, you got to have that roof over your head. But there's always, no matter who you are, and that's why I feel like, at least what I've seen of like today's modern culture, and you know, people our age and stuff, it's just like people go to work, then come home, and then they either don't do anything or distract themselves, or they got another job and they gotta, you know, constantly keep themselves busy. But there's always a point where you ask, why am I working? Why do I have to work all the time? And then you see injustice, or you see rich people that got rich unfairly, or you see this and that, and et cetera, and then you start to ask why, and things become harder. The practical becomes harder to do, and it's because when humans realize that they're on autopilot, you all of a sudden realize, like, I'm not a robot. Like, why am I doing this? I'm not a robot. You know, at certain points, no matter who you are and no matter where you are, there's moments of silence, you know, where it's just you. Whether it's in the moments you're going to sleep, whether it's I think that's why so much stuff, you know, I think that's why paranormal stuff happens right when you're going to sleep. That's why, or like sleep paralysis, etc., because that's the moment where all of a sudden it's silent, and that is where it's just you. And well, sometimes if you're not aware that it's not just you, then you really, you know, feel a void or feel empty, you know, and or that's when things could speak to you that aren't you, you know, demons and etc. So we all have the moments of silence, and that is where I always feel that it's either silence for people is either a void, an emptiness, or it's peace and tranquility, and it depends on if you have answered that why. Because when it's just you in silence, you realize what is actually reality, what is existence, why am I here, and you ask the why questions. It's impossible to go through life fully and never ask the why of it.
Yeah, and I think that the other side of that coin is it speaks to what we see in the Bible is that everyone is created in God's image.
Yep.
So even during those times of not living consistently in your thought process or your beliefs and going through all those things that we were just talking about, like there's still enough of the image of God in human beings that we still understand love to some degree.
Yep.
We still understand friendship and honor and, you know,
Remnants of God's creation.
yeah, remnants of God's creation. So like I think that really speaks to that everyone has the image of God in them to some degree, that we can still function, you know. And it's just sort of like, you know, to me that's awesome, is that like, you know, because if there wasn't that element of everyone having that image of God, like it would be complete chaos, you know, and no sustaining at all.
What do you think about Dr. Michael Heiser? Check him out. You know, he's with the
He's a
Lord
good
now,
guy,
but he said in Supernatural Sermon, he said to be human is to be the image of God.
Yes.
You know, because it's like being a human. I forgot who said it, and it's kind of a cliche, I guess, in like Christian community, but it's like you have a God-shaped hole in your heart, and only God could you know, fill it. And it's true if we were created by God for a particular purpose, to be in perfect union with Him, and we lost that union, then we are all, like you said at the beginning of the episode, we are all searching for God, but we do not realize it. So we always try to fill it with other things, and at the end of the day, whether that satisfaction lasts a day, a year, or 10 years, however much, there comes a point where you're gonna die and you realize, was that really true? You know, what did that really fill? You're still empty, there's still something missing, because it's the ultimate why, the ultimate purpose of God.
I you know, I think even outside of, you know, people who believe God, being so close to that image, you know, like you even hear people saying like, you know, family's the most important thing, right? It's like at the end of your life, you don't, you know, it's not gonna be your co-workers around your deathbed, it's gonna be your family type of thing, and it's gonna be, you're not gonna wish like, man, I went to the club, I wish I went to the club more when I was younger. It's like, no, I wish that you know, you start having those moments of like, you know, family is what's important and things like that. And I think I think that's the relationship aspect, and that's literally how we're designed, is to be in relationship with other human beings. And you know, so even apart from God, those things bubble up at some point, right? And when it comes down to it, like you're on your deathbed type of thing, it's just like, you know, you're not like, man, I wish I bought more clothes, or I had all the technology, you know, you know, it's like no, you kind of look back and it's just sort of like the relationships in the family, and you have it or you don't have it. And
exactly. Yep.
So I think even the people, you know, it's still apart from God, there's still, you know, you can have your family around you, but there's still going to be that element of like what's beyond that type of thing.
What's beyond that. And then unfortunately we do not live in a perfect world, so sometimes family doesn't actually care about you. You know, sometimes that's what's rough. You know, sometimes family doesn't care about you, and now what you have. And even when you have a loving family, the humans are imperfect, so they won't always get it right, they won't always be there for you. And again, is your sense of identity, your sense of purpose based in another person, right? Who will fail you at some point, right? But in continuing on that line where it's just kind of this is the natural process where all humans are made in the image of God, no matter what. So the idea that we're able to think, that we're able to reason, that we're able to know something is good or evil. No matter where you go in the world, people may callous their hearts. People may, ignore it long enough, but every human knows something is wrong and something is right. The moral law that we all know. Murder, rape, torture, these are like basic things that we could all agree are evil. But it's back to the why, right? It's back to the why. If the beginning was meaningless and there was no morality, at what point was evolution far enough to say, all right, now we're gonna be moral, quote unquote? Is it a bunch of minds that come together? But what if someone disagrees?
Right,
and what if governments disagree? Like again, I always go back to World War II, Hitler and the Nazis. He was the official government of Germany. So if the government is the highest authority, like you were saying with Dune as well, whoever's at the king of the the king of the high castle,
who plays God?
Exactly,
who gets to be God? Yeah.
So there's ideas like that, and it's all the natural logic, right? Like I always just want to think consistently from the beginning to the end. What is most consistent scientifically, mathematically, morally, philosophically, and time again, that brings me back to scripture, the Bible. It seems to be the most reasonable and most possible thing, right? Because again, when we talk about the beginning of everything, you can never prove things with a stamp, with scientific 100% fact. Like you just can't. Like anything in the past, this is what is most likely because this is what's most consistent. We have a brain, and the Holy Spirit obviously speaks to you. And the question is, if we go back to the beginning and now we establish a new consistent beginning, as in God, there's things that will never make sense. I know I'm rambling just a little bit, but it's like when we talk about the beginning of the universe, the beginning of not just of everything, whatever else, the heavens and the physical world and the spiritual world and everything, when we talk about the beginning, people say, how can you believe in God? That's ridiculous. It's like, yes, it is. And so is believing that nothing just magically appeared. Like when we talk about the beginning, everything's gonna be ridiculous, right? Everything's gonna be crazy. There's not gonna be a, yep, everything's perfect and whatever. But it's consistent when it comes to scripture if we believe God, right? If his word is true, if he is who he says he is. So there's always going to be that faith aspect, right? And there's always going to be that ridiculous aspect when we talk about the beginning of the universe. So it's either there's nothing and something just magically came up, which makes no sense, or there's God, who just has always been, which also doesn't really make sense to us in our logic. But if God is who he says he is, and he is supernatural beyond the nature, then it would make more consistent sense, especially with our observations today, that there is logic, that there is morality, that there is truth, and there is the very idea of philosophy and science and math and things like that, order and laws of the universe and of nature.
Yeah, I think the idea that there's just matter, there's just stuff, and that's it, is not good enough to explain why things should be a certain way. Because you're like, oh, this is how things just are. But then as soon as you bring in, but you should do this, it's like you're drawing on something that's above that you're pointing to, right? So that could just be like, oh, we just both evolved and it's human nature, survival of the fittest. So if it's fit for me to survive to kill you, that's good. And if it's fit for you to survive to kill me, that's good.
Whoever's stronger.
The moment you say, but we should do something, we're leaving that element of this is the natural way of things, and you're drawing on something beyond the natural world, supernatural in a sense. And that's what people don't understand, is that to even have these ideas of we should and shouldn't do things, you're already drawing on something outside of this naturalistic worldview, that it's just the stuff around this is what's reality. So that's one of those inconsistencies of, we operate as if there's a God, even if we think there's no God. You know what I mean? And that's the thing, because otherwise our society would just kind of fall apart. And I think that's just something that people don't realize, you know, and it's just sort of how it is.
I think we could see as well, like just with our own eyes, when a society disregards God completely, you could see chaos ensue more and more and more, because it becomes opinions, it becomes what is truly moral, what is truly important, and stuff like that to a society, to America, and to whatever country you may apply it to. So it's, yes, we all operate on the idea that there is a God, or at the very least objective truth,
Right.
which, if we boil it down, is going to point towards an objective God. So yeah, I love talking about the beginning of everything, because you just have to talk about that before you talk about anything. Like, I mean, I could talk about Jesus, which is obviously the core central point of Christianity, right? Jesus Christ and Christianity. But none of it makes sense or has a point unless this is how it was from the beginning to the end.
Yeah, and I think people may not realize how much they are influenced of what they think about the beginning. And I remember having conversations with my oldest brother, who was very much an atheist for a majority of his life. And you know, I had to point out to him, yes, it's logical that you don't believe in God because you think we started off as some primate and ooga booga'd ourselves into humanity, to what we are. So if this is the natural worldview, what we just described, that you fit in, then yeah, there's no God. But if you believe that we were created a certain way and we fell, and human beings are actually progressively getting further from God, you know, that shapes how we view the world. Like, you know, like for you, your whole worldview makes sense because
you made it.
It's like it's a closed argument in a sense. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, we started here, and you know, like I said, we evolved, and then that's it. It's like, yes, your beginning and your end makes sense, but you know, because it's a whole formulated thought, but that doesn't still explain the outside realities, right? And that's why I was trying to get to him, is like, what you think of how we started is affecting what you think today. And I think for him, that was one of those, someone described it to me as, it was like a pebble in the shoe, you know, like it's something that he couldn't get rid of. And he now believes in God, actually, as of like not even 2 years ago. So recently, and he said, he always points back to that conversation we had, that was like 10 years ago. It was literally, he had come into town for our wedding, mine and Danae's wedding, and that's when we had that conversation. He goes, I never forgot that. He's like, and one of the things was, he's like, you just sort of respected my view, and you let me see the logical conclusions, and you said, yeah, of course you believe that. And he was just like I kind of wanted an argument, but you just kind of like really pointed out what I thought. And he goes, I never forgot that. And it was just one of those things. It's like, well, yeah, like what you think of your origins does shape what you view for the world today, whether you realize it or not. You know? And I remember a funny thing that one of my professors said was, you know, for that worldview, it was, I was an amoeba beginning to be, and then I was a fish swimming in the sea, and then I was a monkey swinging in a banyan tree, and now I'm a professor with a PhD. You know, and that's that idea of like, that's what humans think. You know what I mean? I was each step, and now we're here. You know, and it's just like, that's not how it works. You know, like, look at reality, look at the world around you, and the things that are intangible, like, you know, like math and things like that. Like, there's no, like, you can't you know, observe like scientific formulas or mathematical formulas and things like that.
What
like,
are numbers?
Right, yeah, what are numbers? And or even like the idea of like, you know, only things that you can observe and test, and you know, the scientific method, only things that you can prove are to be believed. Well, that statement itself can't be observed and tested and proved and believed.
Exactly.
So like what you just said literally doesn't make sense from what you just said. You know what I mean? Or the idea like there is no truth. Well, is that true? Is that true? Is that true that it is no truth? Because then you literally just said the opposite of what you said. It's the ideas that like, oh, wait a minute, there's a framework that our minds have to operate in to actually make sense of the world.
And that's why it's like, it goes further and further back, these questions that a lot of people just haven't thought of, and for whatever reason that may be. And it's, you keep on going back from the physical, it always leads back to either science, I guess mainstream scientists would say information and matter, but what is information and how did that come about? So, and to an eventual point, you could lead that back to a mind, right? And then a mind will obviously always imply, was there a mind before all things? Was there thoughts before all things? which would lead to, well, there's a God, there's an intelligent being that created all things and established the logics of everything. But yeah. I always love to talk about this. Just it's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun and it's important. You know, it's fun and it's important because I don't know, man. I see a lot of sadness and hopelessness
Yeah.
and like people that just are aimless in a sense, right? And I'm not saying that I've never suffered from that either. Like I live in the world, I live in this generation. Like I understand the frustrations or the sadness of like living in the world, really, right?
Yeah.
Of just
I'm
living.
here.
Exactly, right? But it's what is if you have a ultimate hope beyond the physical world, beyond just what I observe, then there's hope and true hope for a better tomorrow in both the literal sense and in the eternal ultimate sense that there's a better new heavens, new earth to come. But yeah.
Yeah, I think a cool thing is all the things we talked about with like, you know, the logic and the inconsistencies is the one thing I really love about how God has revealed himself is like that's not how he revealed himself. Jesus didn't come down and give us a systematic theology dictionary. He came as a person. The Bible's a narrative story. It's a history of events, and so much truth can be communicated in just stories. You know? And that's how God did it. You know, like, and yes, he gave us a brain to make these categories and to have these thoughts, and that's what we're supposed to be using our brain for. But when it came down to God actually revealing himself and having his word written down, it's story. It's a story. It's about a person, about God, about us, and I think that's powerful. I mean, obviously, because God did it. You know what I mean? Like he's right. Oh, you're right, God. You know, like. But the idea is that like the way he chose to reveal himself is through that story, and even Jesus himself told parables and lived his life amongst people. So I think that carries a weight. Yeah, it was just absolutely insane. He didn't give us a catechism. He gave us parables, you know, and lived his life. And I think for me that gives us that ability to really observe art and media and see where we can see God in that, you know, and because that's how he did it. You know, that's how he revealed himself. So yeah, I look forward to talking about whatever. And how it all fits together, because that's actually what I talk with Danae about all the time.
Yeah,
too.
I know.
I'm reading books. I'm like, man, this makes me think of this and that.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, I always have random thoughts, and I'm always just thinking. You know, so it's just like I want a place to talk about and just say random things. You know, but if anybody has any like comments or questions y'all want, go ahead. But if not, I'm just gonna do a final little thought, which is some speculation. Which is
Okay.
cool.
All right.
Since I've been playing God of War, right, and I was like, where do all these mythologies and ideas really stem from, right? And obviously, I go back to scripture, stealing the chocolate. But I was like, where do these ideas come from? These mythologies, right? Is there any sense, right? Which is just a word that describes spiritual beings, almost like saying human, but for spirits. And it's were those gods, since they disobeyed God, real God, ultimate God, were those gods, did they present themselves in those ways? Where they, obviously I'm not saying like maybe Zeus or Thor in the specifics,
right.
but were those Elohim, were those false gods, did they present themselves as those grand gods that became mythology, Norse mythology, Egyptian mythology, etc.?
Yeah, I think so. So the actual verse, so it says God takes a stand on his own congregation, and he judges in the midst of gods, right? And then and he talks to the gods, how long will you rule unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? But the idea is that here's a verse in the Bible saying God is in a council of gods. And a lot of us read the Bible like, wait, what? It's just sort of like, huh? It's like, so other translations try to translate it as rulers or different things, but it's like, no, it says God's in the midst of gods. And this other parts in the Bible, it talks about this, what we call divine council. And God splitting the earth after the flood, after the Tower of Babel, into different areas where humans go, and each has a divine being like kind of responsible for the area, and that's actually true even in the New Testament. You know, it says like there's angels that are over the churches, and that's a whole. I would love this topic. That's in the Bible. We're gonna talk about it even more before,
because then there's Jesus becoming the destroyer of God.
Yes. So that's a great thing, because what it shows is that we have biblical precedent. Like, we have in the Bible this idea that there's almost a pantheon of gods, and I say gods with a little g, little lowercase g, because
God in description of
a type of being,
not in title, because obviously there's only one God. Title and being.
The word that, like you said, the word that it's used is Elohim, and it just means like this divine figure, right? But the way the Bible speaks about God is he's the Elohim of the Elohim, right? So that he's still always separate, right? So it's just talking about here, it's a being, right? Yeah, he's the Elohim above the Elohim. So it's not acknowledging that these other beings are equal to God. He's the one that still created everything. So there's never that. It's not saying they're all equal.
Yeah. That's why I say like the God title, ultimate God of the gods race, like their being.
So with that, that was actually my first thing, because Dr. Michael Eisner, just look him up. He's a great guy. Great scholarly work. That was the what does that say? Something popped up on there.
We're almost done.
Sorry. Got distracted. So is my first thoughts after really soaking in a lot of his teachings was that makes a lot more sense for Greek mythology. Yep. And what I was talking with my oldest brother, because he was a big Greek mythology person.
Because it's fun.
Yeah, it's I love this stuff. Yeah, is that makes so many more things click and to me fit better, because I don't think human beings were dumb back then, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And there's some things, even today, we believe in the supernatural. You go to a normal person on the street, do you believe in the supernatural and things like that? Like, oh yeah, you know, like the most common thing is a belief in that. It's something, right? And to think back then that there was these entities, you know, what they would call the gods going over them, but
bro just stared into my soul. We were just like looking.
Sorry, but it's just one of those things where like that makes more sense now. I'm like, oh, there actually is a biblical precedent that there's these lowercase g gods, and that people are actually seeing something and worshiping something.
And it brings more, because a lot of people, at Dr. Michael Heiser also says, it's like a lot of people, especially Christians, shy away, like, oh, there's no, because it's the word gods, right? But I feel like it glorifies God that much more. Capital G, real God. I just say real God because real God, because it's like, okay, so there is beings that have cool, awesome power, quote unquote, but there's still nothing compared to real God, God of gods. And I think in scripture it says, dang it, I can't remember the specific verse, but it's the gods are vain, or the gods are nothing in the face. The other gods are nothing in the face of God, real God. So
I think
awesome.
to me it makes a lot of sense. Like to me, like a lot of the writings I read for my classical education even made sense. Things that this wasn't even taught in my education, but like there's an example when Socrates is, if you guys are familiar with Socrates, he drank poison, like Athens, they voted to kill him. He's like, oh, you're polluting the minds of the young. And it was interesting because the charge was you're telling them to that there is no gods, right? Like the Greek pantheon of gods, right? But if you ever read Socrates' apology, his apologetic, like his defense, right? It's funny because in his own words, he's saying, like, he goes, and this might sound familiar as I start talking about it, is that Socrates was like, why are you charging me for saying there's no gods? I'm just trying to see what's out there. Like, it's a Socratic method, all this stuff. He's a smart guy. And his account was, I went to the oracle of Delphi. Like, so he went to the local goddess because he's like, I don't believe in these gods. And he said, and he goes, the goddess appeared to me and told me, no one is wiser than you. And Socrates goes, that's not true. And he said, I spent my life talking to everyone to see if anyone is wiser than me. And I started realizing that maybe that was true. I can't find anyone that would as a consistent thing. Like he would
Right.
just poke holes in everyone's argument, even though he didn't necessarily always have his own position. He just poked holes in everyone.
Yeah.
And that's what they were charging him with. Like, you're making people not believe in the gods because you're poking holes in everything.
Yeah.
But his whole premise was like, it's the God who told me that. I'm trying to tell you, like, I'm doing this because this guy. So all throughout history, it's like, well, obviously Socrates is tongue in cheek. He didn't really see a God, and he didn't really tell him that. He just went about. But now I'm like, no, maybe he did. Maybe he did. Maybe he, because the whole thing with Socrates, he always tells the truth, right? And the thing is, like, why would he lie about that?
Yeah.
Why would he lie about that foundational being of what was his motivation of why he was doing everything? And that's the whole irony of it, is like, through all this time, even I read it, I'm like, oh, he's just joking on them or whatever.
We always just think it's generalized or just conceptual.
Right, yeah, but he was just like, no, I went to the oracle, and the oracle's the one who told me that. Like, the goddess is the one who told me this, and I was trying to see if she was right, and apparently I was right. I don't know, but he goes like, his whole thing was like, why are you putting me on trial? I'm listening to the God you're telling me that I'm telling you doesn't exist or whatever. And now I look back and I'm like, man, maybe there was something there, you know. So to me, that makes even more sense of Socrates and what he was saying, because if that was true, then that was true, you know. And it's just sort of like, so anyways, but that still all fits into what God has revealed.
Exactly.
Is that doesn't mean that there weren't these entities and divine beings directing humanity. And even today, like, conspiracy theorists think that, you know, now it's just like, oh, people get naked in the woods and worship whatever, and they rule the Illuminati or whatever. It's like, yeah, there's still things going on. You know, it's just sort of. But yeah, I just think that made more sense to even classical ancient writings about stuff like that. Is now I actually believe that elements of more realism in what people were probably describing and seeing. You know, it's like, not saying like Zeus himself was the God, but they probably saw something. You know?
Exactly.
There was probably something that's revealing themselves.
Exactly.
And that's what God himself in the Bible's like, I'm judging the council of the little g gods, and why have you been doing a poor job?
Because they have not been doing as God instructed. And obviously any God, little g, any Elohim that isn't, or that demands worship and doesn't demand to worship the ultimate God is obviously already doing something wrong here. But yeah, it's a cool concept, because like for the longest time, it's like, I would just think there's nothing, like immediately, like just like, oh yeah, no, that when
make
they say
believe.
that,
It was just make believe.
Exactly, nothing more than a fairy tale. But it's like, in the Bible, if this is true, then it's directly pointing to there is other beings of the spiritual realm, which makes sense. And also in Genesis, even I'm reading that a little different when it says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And you know, you would know more about this, where it's the third heavens where God is, or like the physical heavens and then all that. So it's like, is that where he created literally the heavens and the earth, you know, both the physical and the spiritual realm? So there's just so much that's really intriguing. And not only does it, you know, glorify God even more, capital G, but it just makes things even more awesome, like life more awesome, you know? Gabe has now converted to a believer of the Cthulhu religion. Yeah, you
missed the point. Yeah, but the point is that there's a God above that God. That's my point. You know, I'm just saying.
Exactly.
Like, you may be, you know, in that religion, but there's one above it. You know,
exactly. And then, yes. What is the point exactly? I don't want to worship an imperfect, not ultimate God, right? Goodness, I don't want to see Cthulhu.
Yeah.
I still do not want to see Cthulhu or any of that. But all right, I think that's a good episode 1. We had a lot of topics to talk about. I just want to again establish that base and just keep talking about random stuff. So next time we will keep talking. We still have a ton of ideas, like specific ideas, but today was just a generality of how it will go, what we want to talk about, the base of what we believe, which is going to be the Bible, and just fun thought processes, and then we'll go more into depth about us as well in one of these episodes at least.
Yeah. Let us know if there's anything you want us to talk about or have thoughts of. Because my whole thing is like, which when Tito presented this idea to me was like, I love stories and seeing things in stories, and I love the classical stuff and trying to see like, where does God fit in all of that. So if there's any topics specifically or anything of like,
we'll go into
anything,
depth about stuff too, and like specific stories. Look, I even got this Elden Ring book. Elden Ring has pretty cool lore. This is Elden Ring manga.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Literally, it's an Elden Ring manga. Pretty cool. But like, I want to go into specifics on story, because there's a lot about It's like a whole different belief of like the outer gods and the eldritch beings, basically Cthulhu,
right,
like you were
right.
saying. But all that stuff, it's fun to talk about, and it's important to kind of lead it back to the ultimate story of what seems to be the ultimate truth of everything, you know. But appreciate you guys being here. Thanks so very much. Leave any comments you have, any questions you have for the next topic, next time we do this, which we're still debating on how often we're gonna do it, but maybe bi-weekly, maybe every 3 weeks, I don't know, something like that. But we're gonna do this again for sure. And so leave your questions, comments down below, random stuff. If not, we're just gonna rant again, you know.
Yep.
But appreciate you guys. Thanks so much for being here. I'm gonna go turn off this stream so you can just look at Gabe awkwardly for a couple of seconds. All right, see y'all.
This cup is actually crooked. It felt like the camera was like, oh, that looks funky. It's actually crooked. So, macaroni cup.